Welcome along, fellow Duel Links enthusiasts, to another video. This video is directed not just at my Dark Magician fans, but at everyone that plays Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, because recently the Predator of the Abyss mini box debuted in Duel Links, and with it brought about a new archetype to the game, Mikanko. Now, if you're not familiar with what this archetype does, it essentially gives the opponent big attack monsters and just says to the opponent repeatedly, why are you hitting yourself, and wins through damage that way. So pretty much like an Amazon a Swordswoman and other cards like that. Lots of fun, not really. Very annoying, yes. And with the Mikankos, another card was added as well, which is going to be quite interesting regarding rulings, and it might make players, when they face Mikanko players, go, what the fuck? That card in question is Double-Edged Sword, which is part of the Action Duel PvP event that is going on for a few days. So lots of fun there. Now, when you might be thinking, what's so complex about the rulings involving this? Well, if you don't know the Mikanko's effects, each Mikanko monster has an effect that says your opponent takes any battle damage you would take from battles involving it instead. With the regular Mikanko monsters, the non-ritual version, it has to be equipped with an equip card in order to make your opponent take the battle damage. Whereas Ohimi the Manifested Mikanko has that effect regardless. So, if everyone's strapped in and ready to learn, we're going to get into the rulings about this. Because being part of the Konami Judge program and doing my best to learn a lot about rulings to elevate my gameplay, I figured it might serve as an important aspect for some people to learn how damage calculation works. Because not many people know about the damage calculation, all the steps that you go through in order to calculate the end result. So you can see here on the Ohimi page, this is the DB Yu-Gi-Oh! Resources website, which translates the OCG database rulings. There is a bunch here involving the Mikanko monsters specifically, because of the your opponent takes any battle damage effect. And we also have, Double-Edged Sword, which has its own rulings. Its rulings are pretty funky. So since we know what Ohimi the Manifested Mikanko card does, if you don't know what Double-Edged Sword does, you can only control one Double-Edged Sword. The equipped monster gains 2000 attack. Also, both players take any battle damage from attacks involving the equipped monster. If you take 2000 more battle damage, send this card to the graveyard. Now, both players taking any battle damage is the important factor here, which contributes to the Mikanko playstyle with reflecting the damage. Now, there is one important ruling that is listed on the Ohimi page about what happens, as well as the Double-Edged Sword page. How is damage calculated if Ohimi the Manifested Mikanko equipped with Double-Edged Sword battles? Now, cards in this specific ruling, because there's a number of them which list different effects. You have Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon, which in the TCG says, if this card attacks a defense position monster, inflict double piercing battle damage to your opponent. I'm not sure what the OCG text says, but double piercing is something you need to keep in mind. You have Chaos number 96 Dark Storm. Also, all battle damage you take from battles involving this card is also inflicted to your opponent. You have Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, which if this card battles an opponent's monster, any battle damage this card inflicts to your opponent is doubled. And you also have Lyrilusk Recital Starling, which is mentioned in another ruling, which has a same effect as Chaos number 96 Darkstorm, where all battle damage you take from battles involving this Xyz Summon card is also inflicted to your opponent. And yeah, let's get right into it. So getting into the ruling, the main question, how is damage calculated if Ohimi the Manifested Mikanko equipped with Double-Edged Sword battles in the following situations? When attacking directly, when it is in defense position and attacked by Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon, when it battles Chaos number 96 Darkstorm and both monsters are in attack position, when it battles an opponent's Ohimi the Manifested Mikanko and both monsters are in attack position, when it battles an opponent's Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon and both monsters are in attack position. Now, to help visualize how this damage is calculated, I have my little trusty notepad here. Whoop, that is right over my face. Let's fix that up right there. There we go. I have my trusty little notepad, which we are going to directly, type out how the damage, goes through all the steps and how it's calculated, so you guys can see with the process, like how this is done, instead of just like, you know, reading the response and then that's it, you know? A visual helps. So we have my notepad there. So, the answer to this long question, like the long answer to this question, which you need a long answer as necessary. Battle damage is determined by considering different types of effects in the following order, this order here. Furthermore, Blue Eyes Chaos Max is a 1 effect, Double-Edged Sword is a 2 effect, Chaos number 96 Darkstorm and Ahime the Manifested Mikanko are both 3 effects, and Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon is an 8 effect. There's also a translator's note here which says that Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon is a 1 effect, Garuru Wings Resonant Life is an 8 effect, and those are different kinds of doubling, which they are. Chaos Max Dragon inflicts double piercing, whereas, like, you know, Garuru Wings Resonant Life or Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon say any battle damage inflicted is doubled. So different types of doubling, don't get them mixed up. If you want to know which cards have the O1 effect, in the TCG you'll always see double piercing. If you see double piercing, it's the O1 effect. So, when calculating damage, or like once a battle has occurred, damage is considered in this specific order, 1 to 10. This card inflicts double battle damage. Battle damage is taken by both players. Battle damage you take is also inflicted to your opponent, / your opponent takes any battle damage you would take instead. Now, no, these are 2 different effects, but they are classed in the same number. Keep this in mind. Number 4, battle damage is treated as effect damage. Number 5, the player gains life points instead of taking battle damage. Number 6, battle damage becomes 0. Number 7, battle damage is halved. Number 8, battle damage is doubled. Number 9, battle damage becomes X, which X is a predetermined value. And number 10, you do not take battle damage if it is more or less than X. There's also an important note that if battle damage has become 0 when applying 06 effects, the remaining effects are not applied, which is true. You cannot halve 0, you cannot double 0, you can't change 0 into X, because, you know, the battle damage becomes 0, you can't change it. And number 10, you don't take battle damage if it's more or less than X, which becomes moot essentially, because, you know, 0, you take no damage whatsoever. So now let's take a look at the scenarios and work them out step by step. So, scenario A, your opponent takes battle damage equal to the attack of Ahime the Manifested Mikanko twice. Simple example, we can work it out with our trusty little notepad here. So, what happens? We have 2000 attack Ahime going for a direct attack. Now, if there were no effects in consideration whatsoever, the regular damage would be 2000. Now we need to consider the battle damages taken by both players portion of the double-edged sword effect. So what we do, we give the Ahime controller 2000 damage, and the direct attack, like the opponent gets 2000 damage, still doesn't change whatsoever, so both players take the same damage. Now we move on to the O3 effect. Your opponent takes any battle damage you would take instead. So what would happen here, the 2000 damage that the Ahime player would take is changed to 0, and the battle damage is reflected to the opponent, meaning 2000 plus 2000 equals 4000. So if you want to put that in brackets there, so you got the 2000 damage from the Ahime player, and then you have the 2000 regular damage they would have taken, which gets that end result. Simple enough scenario, is nice and easy to explain. Now we move on to scenario B, which I need to open this up. Here we go. If the defense of Ahime the Manifested Mikanko is lower than the attack of Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon, the controller of Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon takes double battle damage twice. Now, remember these effects. We have a 4000 attack Chaos Max Dragon, and we have the Ahime and the double-edged sword. So let's open our trusty little notepad. So, we have an Ahime with 0 defense and a Chaos Max attacking the Ahime. So, normally how this damage would be calculated if no effects were being considered besides the Chaos Max effect, which is this card inflicts double battle damage, or double piercing, the controller of Ahime would take 8000 battle damage, and that would be it. However, we now need to take the other step into consideration. Battle damage is taken by both players. So, what happens? The Ahime player still takes 8000, and then the controller of Chaos Max also takes 8000. Then we have the final O3 effect. Your opponent takes any battle damage you would take instead. So then what happens? The controller of Ahime puts its battle damage to 0, and the controller of Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon would have 16,000 damage, which is a result of the 8,000 the Ohime player would have received, and the 8,000 damage the Chaos Max controller would originally receive. That's a lot of damage. That is a lot of damage right there. Now, in this scenario, they propose another answer. If the defense of Ohime the Manifested Mikanko is higher than the attack of Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon, the controller of Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon takes damage equal to the difference in values twice. So we need to work this out. So Chaos Max attacks Ohime, and Chaos Max loses the battle, so double piercing cannot be applied. Double piercing cannot be applied because it wasn't higher than the defense. So the controller of Blue Eyes Chaos Max will take 1,000. Then we have Double Edged Sword applying its effect, which would cause the controller of Ohime to take 1,000, and the controller of Chaos Max Dragon would still take 1,000. Then we move on to the third step. Your opponent takes any battle damage you would take instead. The controller of Ohime reduces its battle damage to 0, reflects it to the opponent, which would mean the end result would be 2,000, which is 1,000 damage the Ohime player would have received, and 1,000 damage the controller of Chaos Max Dragon would originally receive. You see where I'm going with this, how the numbers are a little bit more explanatory here. You got two lots of damages that are treated as separate, not lumped together, but they're being separately calculated in order to get the proper end result. Then we move on to the more complex scenario C, which has Chaos number 96 Darkstorm, which inflicts battle damage the controller of Darkstorm takes to the opponent as well. Different effect to Double Edged Sword. So scenario C says, the controller of Chaos number 96 Darkstorm takes damage equal to the difference in attack twice, while the controller of Ohime the Manifested Mikanko takes damage equal to the difference in attack once. And there is a little note here, if the effect of Chaos number 96 Darkstorm or Ohime the Manifested Mikanko make the opponent take battle damage, the effect of the other monster is not applied to that damage. So it's time to get our trusty little notepad here, and we are going to work out the damage step by step. So we need to keep in mind that Ohime the Manifested Mikanko with the Double Edged Sword equipped to it has 2,000 attack, Chaos number 96 Darkstorm has 1,000 attack, so if we do not take any battle damage effects into account, and we only take the 2,000 attack versus 1,000 attack into account, the controller of Chaos number 96 would receive 1,000 damage. This is like just pure without any other battle damage effects considered whatsoever. So then we go through the damage calculation steps and we check the effects. So first we apply the 02 effect of Double Edged Sword. Battle damage is taken by both players. So we have Double Edged Sword causing the controller of Ohime to take 1,000, and the controller of Chaos number 96 would still take 1,000 from the original damage. Then we go through to the 03 effect of both monsters. Battle damage you take is also inflicted to your opponent, and your opponent takes any battle damage you would take instead. Now what happens here, as discussed previously, you have separate lots of damage, then they all get lumped together into a final result. So we have Ohime's effect and Chaos number 96's effects applying simultaneously and reflecting damage and inflicting damage to each other. So what would happen? The controller of Ohime puts the 1,000 damage to the controller of Chaos number 96, meaning the controller of Chaos number 96 in this instance would take 2,000, so both lots of 1,000. At the same time, Chaos number 96 is using its effect to inflict the same damage that it was supposed to take to the controller of Ohime, which is the original 1,000. So the controller of Ohime would be taking 1,000, the controller of Chaos number 96 would be taking 2,000, both lots of 1,000 there. So then you end up having the final result of the controller of Ohime taking the battle damage equal to the difference once, and you have the controller of Chaos number 96 taking damage equal to the difference twice. Now the note that it says here about if the effect of Chaos number 96 Darkstorm or Ohime the Manifested Mikanko make the opponent take battle damage, the effect of the other monster is not applied to that damage. So going back to the notepad, the lots of damage, so the 1,000 that the Chaos number 96 received, that is being given to the Ohime player once. The Ohime player cannot reflect that back, and the 1000 damage that the Ohime player would receive is reflecting this to chaos number 96. Chaos number 96 cannot then inflict that same amount of damage back to the Ohime player. Once it's been affected by an O3 effect once, it cannot be affected again. So that's what happens in that scenario there. So now we move on to the next scenario of two Ohime the Manifested Mikankos battling each other. One's equipped with double-edged sword and one isn't. Both players take damage equal to the difference in attack once. If the effect of one Ohime the Manifested Mikanko makes the opponent take battle damage, the effect of the other is not applied to that damage. So, we get our trusty little notepad out again and we work this out. So taking into account no battle damage effects whatsoever, the controller of the Ohime without the double-edged sword will take 2000 damage. So then we have to now look at the effects and go through them in the order. So we have the O2 effect, battle damage is taken by both players because of the effect of double-edged sword. So the controller of Ohime with the double-edged sword will take 2000, and the controller of the Ohime without the double-edged sword will still take the original 2000 damage. Then we go to the O3 effect, battle damage you take is also inflicted to your opponent. And because both of these monsters have the exact same effect, here's what happens, and it happens simultaneously. So what happens? The controller of the Ohime with the double-edged sword is reflecting its 2000 damage to the opponent's Ohime that doesn't have the double-edged sword, so turning it into 4000, which it's still two separate lots of 2000. But again, at the same time, just adding a little extra bit there, at the same time, you have the opponent's Ohime reflecting its own 2000 damage back to the controller of Ohime. So you end up getting back to the result of 2000 and 2000 because damage is being reflected at the same time simultaneously. And even if you did it in the reverse, you would have 0 on this side, 4000 on this side, but then it would just end up splitting back into 1000. So actually we don't need this extra line here really. So at the end of the result, the final result, you have both players taking damage equal to the difference once. Both effects are applying, reflecting simultaneously, so that way incorrect amounts of damage aren't being reflected back, and so that it's being properly calculated. When you write it all down and work it out, it can make a lot more sense rather than just reading the answer, okay, this is what it does, and then leaving it at that. It helps with this damage calculation stuff if you write it down the numbers and work it out step by step, applying the effects in the specific order. It can make understanding this damage calculation process a lot more easier. Then we move on to the final scenario involving Old Eye's Pendulum Dragon. The controller of Old Eye's Pendulum Dragon takes damage equal to the difference in attack twice. Since Old Eye's Pendulum Dragon does not inflict any damage to the opponent, the battle damage is not doubled. So how does that make sense? So, you have a Ohime attacking into Old Eyes. With Old Eye's Pendulum Dragon being 2500 attack, and an Ohime equipped with double-edged sword being 2000 attack, the Ohime would lose the battle, and the controller of Ohime would originally take 500 damage. Then we take into account the double-edged sword effect, which is the O2 effect, so both the Ohime and the Old Eyes controller will take 500 damage. Then the O3 effect would apply from Ohime, forcing the Old Eyes player to take both lots of damage, meaning it would take a total of 1000, so both lots of 500. Now, we move on to the 08 step here. Battle damage is double, but the thing is, if you look at the wording, any battle damage this card inflicts to your opponent is doubled. So it's got to be direct battle, like direct battle damage cannot be reflected through effects. It's got to be a direct cause of battle. But because Old Eye's Pendulum Dragon isn't the one inflicting the damage, it is the controller of Ohime was originally receiving the damage, but then the damage is being reflected back. It is not the opponent that is inflicting the damage. It's the controller taking damage and then reflecting it back. So the opponent didn't inflict damage to themselves. So it's a lot to take in. It's quite a complex ruling scenario. I'll get rid of the notepad, but yeah, it is very worthwhile having a look at these rulings, taking a deep dive into them, and writing them out yourselves, and just looking at the effects and figuring out how the damage is calculated. because this can really help in a lot of duels and can save you from, like, you know, thinking that nothing's going to happen, you're not going to take any battle damage, and then you might suddenly lose a duel in a single attack. Like, you never know. It's good things to keep in mind. Now, there is a Lyrilusc Recital Styling that I haven't quite addressed yet, but there is another scenario we need to cover first, which explains the 06 effect a little bit in more detail. We have two monsters here, a Daigustos Freeze and a Blackwing Armor Master. But they both battle, which player takes battle damage? Daigustos Freeze has a 03 effect, which says your opponent takes any battle damage you would have taken from battles involving a face-up Gusto monster you control, and Daigustos Freeze is indeed a Gusto monster. And then we have Blackwing Armor Master, which its effect says you take no battle damage from attacks involving this card. So, what happens in this scenario? So you look at the order of effects. So we have the Blackwing Armor Master has the higher attack. So 03 effects, 06 effects. So we go through our little trusty notepad here. So originally, when we take a look at we have a look at, like, you know, no effects whatsoever. Freeze would lose the battle, and the controller of Freeze would take 500 damage. We'll remove Ohime because it doesn't make sense in this scenario, but anyway, 500 Freeze takes damage. So what happens next? We look at the steps. We look at the 03 effect, which Freeze has the 03 effect. Your opponent takes any battle damage you would take instead. So then what happens, we go back to our notepad, the damage is reflected to the Armor Master, which means the control of the Armor Master will take 500. Then we have the 06 effect, battle damage becomes 0. So we now have the end result, this damage becomes 0. As a result, neither player takes any damage. So, when, like, considering these effects, you gotta consider them in their specific orders, and, like, this is how they are all calculated, because if they were in a different order, battle damage would be weirdly calculated, and Konami have carefully crafted a system where the battle damage is done in a specific way to prevent specific scenarios from causing impossibly high numbers, or like numbers that make no sense whatsoever. So now that we have this scenario out of the way, we have the Blackwing and Daigusto monster out of the way, there is another scenario here. If two monster effects that cause the opponent to take battle damage instead battle, which player takes battle damage? What happens here? Now, a human with no equip and a Freeze, they both battle. What happens in this scenario? Trusty notepad is come to save us once again. So, we have Ohime with 0 attack, Daigustos Freeze with 2000. What happens? The controller of Ohime would take 2000. So what happens there? The damage from Ohime gets reflected to Freeze, so Freeze will then take 2000 damage. So with the controller of Freeze taking 2000 damage, you would think that the Freeze would then reflect the damage back, because it's got the same effect, right? No, actually. Because as the ruling even says itself, you know, the controller of Daigustos Freeze takes 2000 points of damage. If you remember from this ruling here that we discussed earlier, if the effect of one Ohime that manifests in Mikanko makes the opponent take battle damage, the effect of the other is not applied. And if two monsters with the same effect have two monsters with the same effect battle, the other effect is not applied. So that way it's not looping back and forth and so on. So the end result, going back to a notepad, the controller of Daigustos Freeze will take 2000 damage, and that will be that. So now we're done with our notepad. There is a couple more rulings to have a look at, and this is where Lyrilusc Recital Styling comes in. So there is a question about, Ivysaur's succumbing song Morganite, which is not available in Duel Links, but it's got an irrelevant effect where it says if your monster battles an opponent's monster, any battle damage it inflicts to your opponent is doubled. If one of the following monsters battles my opponent's monster with 3000 attack, what happens to the battle damage? So an Ohime and a Lyrilusc Recital Styling. So Ohime reflects, Recital Styling inflicts damage to the opponent, the same damage it would take. So what would happen? So if your monster battles an opponent's monster, any battle damage it inflicts to your opponent is doubled. Effect of X card applies to the battle damage that your monsters inflict to your opponent as a result of battle, not to any damage your opponent's monsters inflict on your opponent, such as Ohime's effect and Recital Styling's effect. So in scenario A, if an Ohime was to battle, and you had both players both battle damage inflicted is doubled, the doubled effect would not apply and the opponent would take 3,000. And with Rosada Starling, both players would take 3,000 and there's no sort of doubling whatsoever. So you'll have to keep in mind when you're battling an opponent's monster, if you want battle damage to be doubled, damage has to be inflicted to the opponent, not reflected through various effects. And this is only relevant for the 08 effect, battle damage is doubled. This is different to the 01. This card inflicts double battle damage because the 01 effect, it's double piercing, which is always treated as the first lot of damage to be calculated, and then everything goes on from there. There's different kinds of doubling, and it does get a little bit complicated, but remember, as said previously, if you want to know what an 01 effect is, double piercing battle damage is the big giveaway. If you see double piercing battle damage, you know it's a different kind of doubling compared to Otto's Pendulum Dragon, where it says any battle damage this card inflicts to your opponent is doubled. Now we have one more ruling to go through, and it's not damage calculation related. It is an important ruling for Mikankos, since Ohime the Manifested Mikanko can target an equip spell in the graveyard quick effect and equip it to one appropriate monster on the field. There is a precedent ruling for this kind of scenario. The quick effect of Amazement Ambassador Bufo was activated by targeting an equipped trap you control. When that effect resolves, can I equip that trap to my opponent's first Dark Lord, even though it cannot be targeted by card effects? Which, if you guys have faced against Dark Lord's Despia, you would know the first Dark Lord, you can't target fairy monsters. The control of Dark Lord controls. Well, the first Dark Lord, sorry. Now the answer to this, yes you can. That effect of Amazement Ambassador Bufo does not require you to target any monsters, thus you can equip your trap to the first Dark Lord that cannot be targeted by card effects. So, if your monsters cannot be targeted, be aware that Ohime the Manifested Mikanko can still equip spells to those specific monsters. Just because you have targeting protection does not mean your monsters are safe whatsoever. And you will see this in the ladder where your monster isn't targetable, but your opponent will still be able to equip that monster with cards. So keep that in mind. So that is the end of my little rulings education video there. I hope this helped to explain the rulings a bit more, and I do apologize if this got a bit complex or got out of hand or was hard to follow. I wanted to do my best to explain this to people. I do highly encourage you, if you're still a little bit confused, still a little bit unsure, you can always, reach out to me, ask me, I can do my best to explain more. Or what I would highly recommend is going to db.ygoresources.com and have a look at these rulings for yourself. There are so many rulings, you can get so much knowledge from these rulings here. There's so much you can learn, and it can teach you a lot more about the game's mechanics than you would ever know just playing the game and seeing how things roll. And you want to be educated more on this kind of stuff, let me know, because I do my best to help out people, and yeah, that's really about it. With that being said, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.